This week on Got Clutter, Get Organized, the conversation.
We collect clutter, and there's a psychology behind it, as you know, and it's a lot of it has to do with that guilt of what can we get rid of, and that applies even more so to photos and those memories. So
Hello and welcome to Got Clutter, Get Organized, the conversation. I am so excited because we have returning guest Rachel Arbuckle of 2000 Paces, and we really are going to talk about just preserving memories without getting overwhelmed because, I know from personal experience when you open up that box, that container, or look in the corner, it can get overwhelming. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Jenna, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you and your audience. It's always such an honor and a treat. So thanks for having us back on.
So before we get started in the questions, first, I want you to share with those watching and listening what 2000 Paces is, but also I want you to share with them about the award you recently got because I'm
Oh,
just so excited for you.
thank you. Yeah, we're very excited too. Thanks for considering that. So 2000 Paces Put Organizing, we are a company based in San Diego, but we have the honor and the joy to work with families, organizations, and businesses around the country. So whether people ship things to us or we fly out to them, and really what we do is make sure the moments that define our lives and our communities are never forgotten in boxes and hard drives or lost to time. And so we do that by organizing print and digital photos, getting rid of, the duplicates in the photos that don't tell your story. And we'll talk a little about that, I think. And getting them preserved and protected from, goodness, now fires, floods, tornadoes, and just, we had a client who had a water heater burst, right? And they lost their photos that way. And the ability to easily find them through keywords and facial recognition. And then, of course, the fun part is making photo books and slideshows. And so we do all the things. And we're really proud of what we do. And then our award, yes, thank you. We were a finalist and won for Best Small Business of the Year through the Carlsbad Chamber, which is the seventh largest chamber, I think, in California. And it was truly such an honor. We're very active in our community, and our focus is always on our clients, again, whether that's families or businesses, but to be acknowledged for our passion and our expertise and our professionalism, of course, is always just such an honor.
Well, I was celebrating all the way on the East Coast when I saw those photos and everything. I was like, yes, yes, yes. I was so excited.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, and what you do, photos carry like we have a deep emotional weight to some of those photos because depending on how old they are, who they are. But why do people sometimes feel so overwhelmed when it does come to just organizing them?
Yeah, that is such a common word that I hear people use when they hire us. I just feel completely overwhelmed. And, that comes from a number of different things, but I think it's because we're not talking about our photos and our children's artwork and photos of our parents and all the scrapbooks and hard drives, etc. They're not just physical items that we need to put in pretty boxes on the shelf and in drawers. And there's a need for that as well. But there's memories tell the story of our journey, right? And so sometimes that's difficult to think about. So the overwhelm is not always the sheer volume, although I think people connect it as if it's the sheer volume, but it's the idea that they are revisiting some memories. And sometimes those are difficult, whether it's a loss or why did I ever date that guy? Or, or goodness, I don't know why I cut my hair like that. I mean, it can be something so simple, but
Yeah.
the emotional connection can feel incredibly overwhelming. And so I think it's important that we recognize that taking on a project like that is not just your time, but it's those feelings inside that you might be confronting.
And you're right. And when we were talking about photos, I immediately went back to, I think it was either seventh or eighth grade, and that shirt. Oh my goodness, Rachel! It was like the shirt. It was like the
What was
floral
I
shirt
thinking?
with. It was a floral shirt with the collar, and I was like, and my mother. It was
I
like
bet
she had. eighth and ninth and high school and college all on the mantle. I was like, oh, the shirt. Can we get rid of this shirt?
But I bet you love the shirt then.
Of course I did.
Right.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's part of your journey and it's part of your story. And it's okay to capture that. And it's fun. Sometimes we have to laugh at those memories.
And we definitely do. So, Rachel, what are some of the mistakes that, people make when they really start organizing those photos on their own instead of really hiring someone like you and your firm to really come in and help them?
Yeah. I think the biggest mistake is that people kind of jump into it without a system or a
Mm,
plan, right? And I always like to compare it to, let's say you wanted to remodel your bathroom or your kitchen. You're not going to go in and just, well, most people aren't going to go in and demo their bathroom and then go, oh, well, I'm going to buy this toilet and let's just put it here. And I'm going to buy this new sink and put it here. And let's just throw this paint color on and this tile, right? There's a plan. And I think that people don't realize that this is a big project, both time and emotion. And so coming up with a plan and a system for how you're going to tackle it, I think is the best way to move forward and recognize that you do need a plan of some sort.
and you do because you will get overwhelmed like I did. And it was like, okay, I got to figure out a plan. But
That's
what
right.
about someone who really is surrounded by, see, now before it was just the physical, but now we've got both. We've got digital, we got physical, and that can be even overwhelming. And is
Absolutely.
there a way I guess you tackle it, or like I think like I'm thinking about what you said, having a system, but is there a way?
Yeah, I'm of course we here at 2000 Paces we have systems in place to, although we customize everybody's project, we do have certain systems in place for various types of media. But if you're doing it on your own, the best way to kind of define what matters is, does this tell a story, and how and who is going to be revisiting that story?
Mm.
And I don't think you need to overthink it. So, is this something I want to pass down to my grandkids and future generations? Well, then you probably want to focus on that family history, right? And making sure that you don't just write things like grandma or my mom. You need to write the person's name, because it's not their grandma, right? Or their mom. We see it all the time. And like, okay, this says my mom, but whose mom are we talking about? Is this stepmom? Is this in law? Is this so really knowing the purpose of it. Maybe you've got younger kids that haven't graduated high school yet, and you want to organize them. And the photos you want to keep, the photos that might matter, are the ones that are going to tell a story for their graduation in a photo book or a photo slideshow. So you might focus more on grabbing some that outline those memories. So I think it's really important to think about what ultimately your goal is when you're deciding what matters. Now, I always say remove duplicates. There's no reason to keep a duplicate photo. If you digitize it, if it's digitized, you can always make a copy if you want it in a frame. So those photos we have from 7th grade, where mom ordered 400 wallets and never did anything with it. I know you know what I'm talking about, and your listeners do too. Keep the largest one because it's going to provide the best quality. And get rid of the ones that are blurry. Now, the caveat to that that's important to mention is I'll just share a story. We had a client who had 2 photos. Her mom, who had passed away, had a sister who only lived to age 14. And this was back in the early 1900s. There were only 2 photos of this young lady, that young girl, really, that passed away. And they were both very blurry. So I'm very hesitant to say throw out all the blurry photos. Throw out
Hmm.
the blurry ones that aren't part of the story. If you have 20 photos of, you at the park when you were in 8th grade, and 3 of them are blurry, you don't need all 20 photos. But if you only have 2 photos of a family member that you've lost, or those are the only ones you have, there is software. We do restoration. There's other places you can find to revitalize that photo. And, another thing to keep in mind is you don't need necessarily a photo of every giraffe at the zoo that you visited, right? Or there's a lot of things you can download. You've got some photos of the Eiffel Tower, and I do think those are powerful. I still remember that I had this horrible photo when my son was younger, and we went to New York, and we visited the Twin Towers, and it was in the late 90s, right before 9/11. And the photo was You could see the towers. And then my son and my mom took a photo, not a very good photographer, by the way, wonderful mother, not a great photographer. But we were right in the corner. And when you look at that from a photography standpoint, you think that's not a great photo. But I'm thrilled that I kept it because now that photo has obviously so much meaning. So it's important to keep that stuff in mind, even if you can download things, that life is changing very, very quickly around us. When you're looking at a photo so that you can keep moving, if you're on the fence about it, keep it.
Okay.
If you're on the fence about it, keep it, because there's a reason. Even if you're not quite sure what that reason is, you might find out later, oh, now I remember that was the dress that my mom sewed for me and it was the only time she did it, whatever. So.
And you kind of touched on my next question is the guilt, because a lot of times you don't want to get rid of those photos or the
That's right.
duplicates because of the guilt that's sometimes associated with it.
Yeah.
So how do you walk somebody through that? Because I almost threw away a photo that I was looking at it. It was an invitation. I'm like, who are these people? And my mother was actually in the wedding,
Wow.
which was before I was born. And she
Sure.
made sure she knew. She's like, "Look, I was in that wedding and I want to keep it and I want to keep the invitation." So, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So isn't it interesting that as women, guilt just, it's like we're born with it, right? We do feel guilty because women typically are natural caregivers and we want to make sure everybody's taken care of. So we think, well, just, do my kids need this? Does my cousin need this? Does my best friend from high school need this? And I think that's wonderful to consider those things. But ultimately, again, it goes back to what we already talked about is what is your ultimate goal? What story do you want to tell without overthinking it? Getting rid of duplicates, right? Again, you can, as long as you're digitizing, which I recommend you do, and you don't necessarily, and it depends on who you are. Some people really want to make sure they're only keeping the best of the best. I want the best photo. We take 100 photos of our children when they're babies and you get one of them right. But the thing that's important to remember is with technology now, we can store so many photos, assuming they're all digitized and consolidated into one place. You can store a lot of photos, both on an external hard drive and on an online site. So it's not like you need to get rid of everything. The other thing is sometimes we have clients and we even went to a client. This was for a private school in LA, but I had to take a U-Haul up to pick up their stuff. It's a lot, right? First of all, once you consolidate and organize and get rid of those, poor quality and duplicates, it's going to shrink down. So wait until you're done before you decide. But once you digitize them, it doesn't mean you have to keep the print photos. Now, we recommend you keep the print photos because it's kind of fun and the nostalgia of having that, particularly now when people are having less and less. But you can, if you, let's say you live in an 800 square foot apartment in Manhattan, right? You don't have room for boxes of photos. That doesn't mean you can't digitize all of them and then just keep a few of the print that are really important to you.
There were so many things going through my mind, Rachel, when you were talking, because I do remember when I went through all of my mother's photos, and then I shared with you before, she was a
Right.
photographer too. So basically, I'm like, I do not need my cousin, who is now 6'7", when he was in his first Easter outfit. I don't
Right.
need that, but I did send it to him. So you're right, when you kind of go through and just figure out what you need. But my question is, and actually, I think this is just a personal question, Rachel.
Okay. Uh-oh, we're getting intimate.
So how do you decide when you're really looking at photos
Yeah.
and you've gone to high school with people, college with people. Well, now it's 25 years later.
Yeah.
And yes, in the beginning when you were still saying connected, they were sending you pictures of the kids. How do you really kind of get rid of that stuff without guilt? Because I'm like,
Right.
I have not seen these people in 25 years. And
Yeah.
I know in my mind what I need to do, but it's still part of it. Like, oh, do I? I'm still
Right.
feeling something.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that your podcast is aptly named, right? Because we collect clutter and there's a psychology behind it, as you know, and it's a lot of it has to do with that guilt of what can we get rid of. And that applies even more so to photos and those memories. So when you're going through your photos, again, you start with the easy ones, the duplicates, the poor quality, the extra giraffes, that kind of thing. But then when you come to those photos, if there is not a story that again, go back and maybe even write it down on a dry erase board or a note. What is my goal I'm trying to achieve? And if your goal is, I want to pass these memories down to generations, for example, and you're not connected to these people, if they have no meaning for you, they're certainly not going to have meaning for future generations. So I think it goes back to why we feel guilty, because we're caregivers. We want to do the right thing by the people that we're passing these on to. So start thinking about what kind of story is important for them to kind of ease that guilt. You don't know them. You have a trash bag set right there. It's okay. You're not throwing away the person you became from those memories. And they might have been wonderful memories. But if 25 years later, they have no meaning for you, you say, oh, that was fun. Maybe you keep a couple so that you can remember, oh, the college years, it's sometimes our kids don't realize we were actually young ones.
That's true.
So you might want some proof of that, but it's okay to do that. Now, conversely, I see people who just say, I want to get rid of all these photos and I really want to purge. And I'm all about cleansing. I think it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But I have heard people that have come back to me and said, I got rid of a whole bunch of photos because I really wanted to just get rid of stuff. And then I wish I'd kept a few. So that's where I say, if you're on the fence, maybe you're on the fence for the entire story. And maybe it's a sorority, that you were part of for a few years. Pick 10 of the best photos if there's 100, or 3 of the best photos if there's a dozen. And keep those, because you can always delete those photos later, right? And it's quite honestly, Janet, one of the advantages of working with professional photo organizers is that we sometimes help make those decisions. We have clients that say to us, listen, I don't have the time, the energy, or the willpower to throw them out. And here's what I'm looking for. And they would tell us, I want my grandparents, I want our family, and then, here's a few cousins that are really important, and we can make those decisions. I actually remember a few years ago, I had a client that we had worked with and done everything and converted all their home movies, the VHS tapes that you can't watch anymore. And she wanted to take everything back with her, and we put them in beautiful boxes, and it was labeled, and she had the digital copy. And about 6 months later, she called me and said, Rachel, I've decided, we've looked through the videos. We feel good about the digital copy. We backed them up online, or we had helped them do that, which is really important before you get rid of anything.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I want to get rid of these, but I can't do it. Can I drive down? And she lived over an hour away. Can I drive down and hand them to you? And you can throw them out. I mean, that's a real story, and it's powerful. So there is an advantage of working with a professional organizer to help you make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some organizers that will sit down with you and work
Mm-hmm.
hand in hand, give you homework assignments, or simply do it for you. And that's where you have to make the decision about what are your challenges and where can you get some help.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. Sometimes clients do that. They said, Janet, look, let it go. I don't even want to see it. Just put it in the trash. So
Right?
you're right. You're
I
right.
don't want to see it.
Yeah, and you're right. Like working with someone like you can really help people, first of all, categorize, sort, and sometimes because of you and that expertise you have, you can really look at a photo and like, well, wait a minute, this is somebody's thumb. It's not really anything.
Right.
Or you've got 12 pictures of the giraffe in the
Right.
same position. So
People
yes,
really like taking photos of giraffes. That's why I use it as an
really.
example. The giraffes, they're just so fun to take photos of. But at the same time, so we work with genealogists, we get a full family tree. And there are times that when we present the final project to a client, we say, did you know this is your great great grandmother? And they didn't even know that they had photos because they hadn't looked at them. They've been in boxes. So, the other advantage, whether you work with a professional or you're doing it on your own, is there are treasures in there that you may not have even been aware of. And it really also goes back to, if you're able to get the story, if your parents are still available to tell the story, if your grandparents are still available, talk to them. Put your phone down, show them a photo, just hit record and get that story. Because there might be a story behind that photo that you're not even aware of. Now, if your parents, for those listening, if your parents aren't available to give this story because you've lost them, or unfortunately, we've got a lot of clients whose parents have dementia and Alzheimer's, it's okay too. It's still
Yeah.
okay to throw out those photos. It's capturing those moments in our lives that we can look back on and that we can, and whether it brings some sorrow or some happiness, it's about the journey and the story.
And Rachel, that brought back a memory of when I saw a picture of my grandmother with the kids. I call them, well, the aunts and the uncles. I say the kids, the aunts and the uncles.
Right.
But
Yeah.
she had a total of 10 children, but it was only like 6 or 8 in the photo.
Yeah.
And I saw the houses and I thought that was their house. I thought it was my grandparents' house. And
Okay.
my mother was like, oh, no, no. That was, we stood across the street because we moved. And I says, wait a minute. My grandmother moved with 8 children. She's like, oh, yeah, because we need more space. I was like,
Yeah. Talk about overwhelm.
yeah, I'm like, she's like, oh yeah, Janet, we had to move because we needed more space. I was like, wow. And you're right. It was like that picture just triggered a whole story that I just thought they were just, she's like, oh no, we were moving and we just wanted to take a group picture. And
Yeah. I
it's
love that, Janet. That's such a great example of how photos and documents can reconnect us with memories that we didn't even know exist, whether that's a connection that we now recall or we reach out to somebody and ask the story. Now, you've got to be careful if you're doing it on your own, also not to go down that rabbit hole. Because what
oh,
happens
yeah,
is
that's
we have
true.
clients that say, I spent 6 hours this weekend working through photos and I got through about this many, maybe 100 photos. And it's because we look at a photo and we get so excited about the story that we want to call our auntie and our cousin and all these different people. And that's fun and wonderful, but we want to make progress as well. So another reason to have a system and or work with a professional.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, how would somebody just thinking they're watching this conversation, listening to it, Rachel, and they say, you know what, I think I want to get started. Besides calling 2,000 paces, how else would they, think
Of
about getting
course.
started?
Um, there's a number of ways to get started, again, depending on your goals. And so I think because we've been talking about that throughout this segment, I think it's really important to take a few minutes. I would encourage you to get a journal to write it down, and you can write notes for family trees, and that's kind of your photo organizing journal. What are your goals? Then start consolidating things. And when I say that, it means I've got photos at, like you've got some at your cousin's house, right? You might have some in the attic or the basement, photo albums all over, old computers that are sitting in the garage and getting hot and cold. If you have the space to bring everything together and kind of get an idea of what you have, because oftentimes, we'll say, oh, I've got these 3 albums. I'm going to start here. And then we realize, oh my goodness, I spent all this time getting rid of duplicates or categorizing, and there's an overlap of albums or loose photos somewhere else. And now I'm feeling like I'm backtracking, right? It goes back to the remodel. We don't want to put the toilet in or the sink in until we have a plan. So by writing down, taking a few minutes to write out your goals, it doesn't have to be fancy. And by looking at everything you have, you can decide which category you want to work on first, right? Because as you've mentioned, we've got old print photos, we've got negatives and slides, we've got the digital age with the CDs and the thumb drives and the online sites. I would start with one category once you have everything together. Typically, I recommend you start with the most vulnerable items. So if your digital photos are backed up in a cloud, they're safe right now. They're not organized and probably not accessible and easy to find, but they're protected. So oftentimes those print photos are the most vulnerable because they have not been digitized and they are at risk. The Palisades fire came through our community just north of us in LA. I know everybody saw that on the news, and there were so many people that said, I didn't even have time to go home and grab those print photos. And they've got the photos on the cloud, but it's those print photos that really tell our story. That's where our roots are, right? And so pick a category. Now, with that said, if you're going to work on this on your own and not with a professional, which is fine, start with something that you feel comfortable with. So if you look at the print, even though I'm suggesting it's the most vulnerable, and you say, I can't even, I'm getting heart palpitations thinking about it, then maybe getting on your phone and deleting the duplicates, right? If that's easier for you to get started, start where you feel comfortable. But again, say, I have a plan. I'm going to start with deleting duplicates. Then I'm going to start by taking photos out of albums. And I encourage your listeners to set a timer. And that timer could be 30 minutes or 2 hours. You probably do the same thing with your clients, right? Set a period of time. I don't recommend more than 3 or 4 hours at a time. And forgive yourself if you say, I'm going to do 3 hours this Saturday. And after 2 hours, you have to stop because your back hurts, or you get a phone call, or maybe you've come across a photo that's really emotional. It's okay. I would rather you make some progress than feel paralyzed or resentful, and then it just never gets done.
Those are wonderful tips, Rachel. I was thinking about my project, and yes, I did. I decided with my project because I had from 1923 up until the 2000s.
Wow.
So, like you said, I started with the most vulnerable, which was the 1920s, 30s. I started
Okay.
with them first because my stuff was like the high school, the school trips. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go down that road right now.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And how was it going through the 20s and 30s then? How did that feel when you were done with that part?
It was really, for me, it was like just seeing all of that history.
Yeah.
And my family, the Taylors, just love to dress up because my mother's like, "Oh,
Yes.
yeah, we were just sitting around." I'm like, "But you got a gown on, you got some bling around your neck." She's like, "Ah, we were just hanging out at people's house." I'm like, "We hang out, but we have on like sweats." So just
Right.
seeing the transformation and then seeing this one picture of aunts and uncles, everybody had a winter coat and had like a fur collar.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Wow, look at all that style." That was it. It was like the style.
Right. Well, and it's just history changes. And I love that you brought that up. It's kind of like when people used to go to the airport, they would dress up, right,
Oh,
to get on the
yeah,
plane. They
yeah,
would to the nines, right? Makeup,
yeah,
hair, everything. And now you see people in yoga pants and pajamas,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
it's just this everyday thing. That's okay. Things change, times
yeah.
change.
Mhm,
But it
mhm.
doesn't mean that we don't want to respect and remember what got us to where we are today. And I
Yeah.
love that you did that. I think last time we talked, am I correct in remembering like a yellow dress?
It was
Um,
the yellow gloves.
the yellow gloves. That's right.
The
That's
yellow
right.
glove.
And it's those little things that are such big. They take up so much room in our heart in a good in a really good and powerful way. So
Mhm,
I'm so
mhm.
thrilled you did that, and to recognize I'm not ready to take on the high school memories,
Yeah, it
and maybe
was.
you bring in either an expert or a partner to help you. Um, but it's making progress.
Yeah. And actually, this conversation with you is going to make me pull out a picture of my best friend and I on a class trip where we got matching T-shirts, Rachel. Yes,
Love,
we did.
love.
And I think it'll be almost 50, it'll almost be 50 years or maybe that we've
Wow.
been friends. So yes, I'm going to, and then let her daughter see it, which is my goddaughter. Oh, she's
Oh
gonna love it.
wow.
She's gonna love it.
Well, and you didn't know when you took that photo, 50 some years ago, that you would be friends for so long and all
No.
the experiences that you've had, and that's your
Mhm.
goddaughter. And so I love that you're going to connect that. And what's fun is when you do things like facial recognition and you tag your best friend and you put it on an online site, now you can find her, your
Mm.
goddaughter can find her. So again, it's part of those systems, but I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed about that, but know that it's available.
So, Rachel, how can people connect with you, find out, what you offer in regards to services, but also, sign up for your newsletter? Because one of the things you said that always sticks in my mind is the photos stored by a water source? And that made me think about, wait, where are my photos stored? And I
Yeah.
just kind of moved them to the other side of the room. So that was one valuable tip. And when I see that specifically with family and friends, I'm like, y'all got to move that because there's some pipes up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and people don't think about it. I've heard these stories, and I don't know if I shared this last time, but I was a scrapbooker, way back in the day when not to say that people aren't still scrapbooking, but when it was really, really popular, and that was really powerful for me. And I remember I went on a business trip and I had a contractor install a dishwasher, and apparently he installed it incorrectly and my entire house flooded. And I had been sitting on the floor looking through these scrapbooks, and two or three of this is before I started my company, of course, and two or three of the scrapbooks became wet and drenched and moldy, and I was devastated and never scrapbooked again. Now, had that been now, all the rest of my scrapbooks are digitized, so if that had happened, I can convert them into a photo book. So it's really powerful to keep in mind that events like that, unfortunately, can happen without notice. And so this is one of the projects that oftentimes people say, I'll get to it someday. I'll do it when I retire. But the reality is we're constantly taking more photos and making more memories,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
with our cameras in our pockets on our phone, we're taking even more. So every day you wait, it's just more and more overwhelming, and it's really putting them more at risk. So yeah, we do have tips. We send out a monthly newsletter. It's just once a month. We don't blast a whole bunch of stuff out. So if you go to our website at 2000paces.com, so 2000paces.com, I'm sure you'll have it in your link. And you can sign up for our newsletter. You can watch some videos of what we do. We do have some YouTube videos that's at 2000 Paces as well on how to get started with organizing your photos. We even sell a set of cards that you can purchase to start organizing your own print photos. And that's on our shop page. We also offer free consultations to anyone that just says, I'm not sure if I want to work with a professional. I don't know what that's about. I don't understand the cost, what's involved in shipping. It's how we kind of stand out, if you will, from those big box companies. We want to have a conversation. We want to hear what your goals are and talk to you about how we can help you achieve them. And maybe we just give you some tips to do it on your own, or maybe we work together in a hybrid way. So lots of options to connect with us. We've also got a downloadable free guide to getting started on print organizing. So we would love to work with anybody that wants our help. But ultimately, I want people to protect their photos so that they don't experience the sadness that some of us did through fire, flood, and loss.
Yeah. And of course, those of you watching and listening know I will have all the links so you can, connect with 2000 Paces and Rachel directly. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your time. It's always a joy to talk to you.
Oh, you as well, Janet. And thank you for the story. And keep up the organizing. I want you to keep me updated.
I will.
All right. Bye-bye.
So, what did you think about my conversation with Rachel, and what was your takeaway? Like, you may have listened to that and started thinking you need to dive into your photos. Well, why don't you just start with a plan? And of course, if you listen to the audio version, I will share with you how I tackled all the photos in two bins that I had to organize. Check out her website, sign up for her newsletter, and of course, get some tips so that you can begin to just preserve, but not only preserve, but enjoy, and also just begin to share the stories from generation to generation. So, of course, I hope you actually subscribe to this channel if you are already subscribed. And of course, make sure you check all the links in the show page. So until next time, I want you to have a clutter-free day.